So we will find time to chat about Keir Starmer and perhaps dropping the defence bombshell. I'll explain a little bit more about that story in a moment. However, let's talk now about the ceasefire and whether or not the blockade that we're beginning to see across the Straits of Hormuz is actually going to deliver anything for the US, and indeed where we head next. Joining me now is Ambassador Gina Abercrombie-Winstanley, Distinguished Fellow at the Atlantic Council, US diplomat and former Deputy Director for the Office of Iran Affairs and Deputy Coordinator for Counter-Terrorism. Ambassador, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Now, we're talking about the cost of fuel at the moment. The quickest to do so would be to sort out the Straits of Hormuz, yet President Trump is setting up a blockade. What's the impact of all of this going to be?
Thank you very much for having me, and good morning. The markets tell a mixed story. Oil prices have gone up and down, and so they're trying to factor in, is this blockade going to be the end of the hot war, as it were? If it proves successful and Iran is pinned in and other ships are passing through, then that will reassure the markets and give President Trump a win that he's been looking for. I know he's been saying that we've won, but clearly more needs to be done.
Well, to be fair, he always says we've won. Yeah. He always says everything's been obliterated and it's all gone. And then we suddenly find that maybe it wasn't and it didn't and he hasn't.
Yes, I'm not going to argue with you on that. He would, but I won't.
Of course he would. He would argue with himself.
Indeed. So the other part, of course, is, has Iran overplayed its hand? This blockade could indeed be effective, and then the money that they so desperately need, the revenue, is going to stop. They were making over $1 million a day when their oil was flowing and being had sanctions lifted from it. But now, if this blockade holds, this pressure could be that which brings them eagerly back to the table. So we're going to have to see. The other issue, of course, is China and those who have been buying Iranian oil. Do they abide by the blockade?
And when we look at it, so President Trump, it's being reported, has begun this sort of high-stakes blockade on the Strait of Hormuz on Monday. He's got these threats to attack the Iranian Navy in the same way that the US forces, they destroyed the drug trafficking boats in the Caribbean, according to this report. Yeah. So we've got at least two tankers, one said to be loaded with oil for China. They turned around rather than attempting to pass through. I suppose if this blockade continues, and because so much of that oil went to the Far East and to, I suppose, many perhaps supporters, either Iran or indeed those who are trading with Iran, this kind of drags them into this war and conflict, does it not, if America does succeed in blocking off these straits?
It does indeed. And this is very uncomfortable for China. The United States has really pushed hard on freedom of navigation. In principle, the Chinese agree, but they have a different interpretation of it. They will not like the United States determining what oil they get and how they get it. But of course, to challenge this blockade may indeed cause a great deal of tension between the United States and China. So they have to decide what's worse. And of course, we've got the meeting between Premier Xi coming up and President Trump next month. So both sides would prefer to keep it calm before that, but we shall see.
We indeed shall see. So do you think that Donald Trump is betting that he's going to destroy Iran's economy before it massively impacts everybody else?
He believes that he is going to be able to hold out. There are questions about that, because if they do block Iranian oil and other ships don't feel confident going through, and of course, Iran still has some levers to play. The president said that they will attack the small boats, but that doesn't mean the small boats won't put some mines out there in the meanwhile. If they do, it only takes one ship being damaged that stops the traffic going altogether. There doesn't have to be a shootout between whatever Iranian vessels are left and U.S. vessels. It is the mine laying. So if that happens, then we've got oil prices and the market reacting, which is exactly what President Trump does not want. So it's not done yet. It will depend on the Iranian reaction and to a lesser extent, what the Chinese and others do, whether they're going to try and blend the oil to disguise it, whether they'll fiddle around with their tracking devices to make it look like a different flag being flown, etc. There are other ways that tankers have been avoiding sanctions that the Chinese and others might use.
And I suppose if this doesn't get Iran to concede points in either negotiations, and we've seen it before, that Donald Trump, that they've had the negotiations, they haven't necessarily come to a successful conclusion, then we see kind of a second round of moves, and whether it's, as you say, a hot war or a cold war, however it is, in terms of it. But what is America's next move after this? Is it more threats and bombing and this obliteration that he talked about at one stage? Is it further blasting, perhaps, of Iran's capability to, whether it's export oil or elsewhere? What does Donald Trump do next?
Well, he certainly wants us to think that any of those things are possible. But the Iranians have proved repeatedly that they are willing to take hits that certainly the United States would not tolerate in order to resist what the United States and Israel want. And there is not a deep bench for what the American people will accept. Most Americans were appalled at the president's threat to knock out the Iranian civilization, to obliterate the entire country, to be hitting targets that help civilian life. Americans were not pleased. They didn't support it. He doesn't have a lot of space for that, and he won't have a lot of patience if oil prices continue to go up and the market goes down. He knows this.
He certainly does, and it'll be very interesting to see what he does next there. Just before I let you go, we've got King Charles. He's going to be visiting the United States of America. We're all quite focused on it because this whole social relationship being kind of blown out the water, but this thing is still happening. Is there a lot of interest in King Charles arriving, or is it kind of, who's he?
It definitely isn't who's he. We definitely know. We follow the royal family in the United States. Certainly a lot of bemusement, that he's still coming. We do know that the president admires him a great deal, presumably likes him, and therefore we expect a respectful, positive visit, but bemusement that he's still coming when there's so many challenges in the bilateral relationship. It just shows how durable that bilateral relationship really is.
Well, it might be, but all I can tell you is that the fantastic British exporters come your way. I saw on my way into the studio tonight that Marks & Spencer, that great British bastion of fine retailing, has finally exported Colin the Caterpillar and Percy Pigs. They're going to be available in Target stores from today. I tell you, you are going to go brick crazy over in the United States. I think King Charles is going to fix this relationship, and suddenly that special relationship's going to be back on.
It's always been on. It has. And I look forward to seeing these items.
Oh, listen, go and try them. They're absolutely delicious. There we go, Ambassador. Thank you so much for joining us this morning.